Hi there, everyone. This is another episode of the Here to Listen NCS Community Awareness podcasts. We called them Community Awareness because some of you probably wouldn't know as new people to the programme, but in non-lockdown years that we've done, we used to gather together a group of organisations in a room, and young people would come in and you'd ask questions of the organisations as a sort of basis for your social action project. So we're doing these little videos at the moment to involve all those that had signed up for our current one until everything changed. So I'm here with Joe from the Forest of Marston, Vale. Hi, Joe.
Hi, how you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. The sort of history of Marston Vale does go back in my previous career as well, actually. So I worked for an organisation called Youth Action, which supported young people into volunteering. So one lad in particular was helping out, like building benches and doing the sort of workshoppy stuff.
Yeah.
And at the time, it was quite new to me because I think when you sort of think of volunteering at Marston Vale, you think of kind of tree planting and a bit more sort of outdoorsy stuff, less of the infrastructure, I would say. So it was really great that he could get involved with what seemed to be quite a big team. You know, there was like a lead guy and then quite a few volunteers, all of a certain age, let's say. You know, they were older guys, but they were older guys that probably wanted to still contribute. And I think that's very much in keeping with what your sort of values are as an organisation. So I wanted to ask you a bit about the organisation as a whole. You can choose your starting point, you know, whether it's sort of current or lockdown or not, or the history of. So yeah, tell us a bit about the organisation.
Okay, so Forest of Marston Vale, it's a community forest, and there are several community forests across the country, set up by the government over 20 years ago now. And the aim, or the thinking behind setting up community forests was to regenerate areas that were deemed in most need of being regenerated. So in the north of the country, you've got a lot of areas where there was mining, and that left the landscape a bit degraded. And the best way to regenerate a landscape is to plant trees on it. So that's why community forests were set up. Forests and trees are better for, really great for the environment, but also for people, for recreation. And they also regenerate interest in people living in those areas, people moving into those areas. So community forests were set up and did a really good job of regenerating areas that were a little bit run down, a little bit down at heel, I suppose. And you wouldn't think that now if you drive through the Forest of Marston Vale, you see somewhere that's leafy and green and it looks nice and it's a nice place to come and live and work. So it's a pretty successful way of doing that, I think.
Yeah, there's something to be said about the design of a community forest. You know, it's sort of like a thing you have to install when, in fact, it existed many years before people turned up there as well. And seems to be in keeping with people's desire, I think, as well, with to have these open spaces and have these areas that are perhaps away from busy roads and so on.
I think there's a massive desire for it. I think there's actually a need for it as well. I think they've shown, all sorts of studies have shown that people who have access to green space or who can see trees out of their window, it's better for their mental health. As I said, it's also better for wildlife as well. And the tree cover in Bedfordshire was really low when we started. Like I said, over 20 years ago, I think tree cover within the 61 square mile forest area, I think it was about 3% or 4%, which is incredibly low. So there weren't many trees there because of all the brick pits and, you know, all of the industry that was there. And I think now we're up to about 15 or 16% tree cover. So we planted a lot of trees. We planted millions of trees. And our aim is to get it up to 30% tree cover. So a third of the forest area is, you know, wooded. So we're just over halfway towards our target now. We've still got a lot of work to do.
What kinds of other things can be enjoyed when people visit as well?
There's the forest centre in Marston Mortain, which is what most people think of when they think of the forest. So,
I do.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
it extends much more beyond that, you know.
Yeah, it's 61 square miles. So it goes from Milton Keynes to Bedford. and it encompasses villages from Shortstown, Wixham's, Cranfield, Lidlington. So it's quite a big area, and the forest centre is sort of our main site, if you like, in one way. It's where we've got bike hire, where you can hire conference facilities. People get married there and come for a cup of coffee and a cake. But the forest is actually about a lot more than that. So that's the site that people will pay to come and use, pay to park. But then we've created, I think, 12 other woodlands within those villages and communities within the forest. So lots of the villages there have their own piece of woodland that they can use, and that's free for people to access on bike, on foot, however you want to do it. So it's about a lot more than just the forest centre. There's a lot more woodlands that we've created. Some of them, when we plant them, obviously they're baby trees and they don't really look like a forest. But some of them now, like Rectory Wood in Cranfield, it's a big area of woodland, and it looks and feels like an established woodland already. So if anyone's interested, I'd urge them to have a look at our map and go and see some of those other woodlands, because they're really lovely, and they're a bit more peaceful as well than the forest centre, if you want somewhere that's a bit more chilled out and a bit more, where you can go butterfly spotting or whatever.
I think sometimes there's a desire to just be away from roads at times. It's something that I relate to, that I quite like going out on my bike. If I live in Milton Keynes, if I go north out of Milton Keynes, it feels like I am in the middle of nowhere to a certain extent. But I can just about hear the M1 still, do you know what I mean? And it's a little dent in an otherwise a sort of perfect situation that I feel like I'm seeking. And maybe it's part of my personality. I do like quiet as well, but just to be in the middle of nowhere. And I think from a forest point of view, it probably guards against some of that noise, the traffic sort of stuff. Or is it that you've deliberately placed them away from roads? How's that work?
No, we're doing some work actually with one of the parishes that's closest to the M1 at the moment. And one of the things that they're finding is that the traffic noise is really quite intrusive, and tree planting is a really good way of buffering against that. The main reason why we've created our woodlands further away from the M1 is that the majority of the forest is sort of going up towards Bedford, so it's away from the motorway anyway. But yeah, I mean, you can really notice the difference. If you go to a forest that's near a motorway and you go in winter, you can hear the motorway really loudly. If you go in summer, when the leaves are out, it's amazing what a big difference, what a buffering effect those leaves have on the sound. So you can feel like you're, like you said, in the middle of nowhere, I guess, or at least as close to being in the middle of nowhere as you're going to get in this country.
How about the work that you do personally? How would you describe your role? What's the sort of official title, would you say?
My title is Community Engagement Officer. Okay. So I can tell people I'm the CEO, but it's community engagement.
Yeah.
And my role is, it's what it says really. It's working with communities. So I work with volunteers. At the moment, I'm working on consultation with Houghton Conquest Parish Council because, excuse me, we're creating a new woodland, which is just in the parish of Houghton Conquest. So I'm working with the parish council to find out what their views are on that. So I do things like that. I also work with school groups. We have hopefully coming up a massive project, 3 or 4 years of planting trees with school children. So anything to do with communities really is what I get involved in. We've got quite a small team, so we work quite closely together. We used to. Now we work remotely.
Yeah. As it's probably worth mentioning, this is a COVID period at the moment. I'd like to think that these videos are going to be used year on year, and I wonder about the context as well. But yeah, perhaps I wouldn't want to re-record them because I've done that 17. I think they're great little captures. But I must admit the COVID talk is fairly minimal, and obviously worth talking about the kinds of things that are offered in lockdown and not. And one of the rumours that I heard about a month ago was that Marston Vale was open, not necessarily to the public, but or that could be the case. I don't know, but because it's an outdoor area, it didn't sort of
Yeah.
matter so much.
Yeah, I mean, our forests, our woodlands have all been open throughout. Um, we've actually probably found that they've been used more heavily now than ever before, because people are working from home and they are taking some time out of their work day to go and enjoy just being in the woods. The forest centre has been open for a few weeks now, so you can go and get a takeaway coffee. You can sit outside and drink that. Obviously, we're doing what everybody else is doing and having one-way systems and sterilising things. I have to say I haven't been there. I'm working from home, so but I understand that people are trickling back in. I think even bike hire might be open now as well. But yeah, I mean, the great thing about what we're doing is that the woodlands never shut. They were always open for people to enjoy.
And just people have to take responsibility for their own space, I suppose, with social distancing. And I can imagine sort of long paths that you need to sort of step aside. And
yeah, exactly. And I think most people have been really good at doing that. We've had a few wallies in the country park sort of setting fire to things and vandalism, but I think that's not specific to us. I think a lot of people who manage green spaces have found that they've had a big spike in vandalism as well. So it's not personal. It's just people being idiots.
seems a shame. I was going to ask you, related to that actually, you sort of answered it, but in terms of how people look after the spaces, I can imagine. You mentioned about takeaway coffee and hoping. There's a hope within myself that people would take responsibility for their rubbish and bring it back, and not kind of. I don't know how realistic that is. How do
You're a
people treat
nice man, aren't you?
you?
I have to say the vast majority of people do that. And it, as always, it's just a few pillocks who kind of leave their rubbish behind. Most people do take their rubbish. I think with the rise of all things takeaway and disposable now, there is going to be probably a bigger issue with litter. But yeah, it happens everywhere, unfortunately. Everywhere you get things that you can throw out of your window or dump for somebody else to pick up, it happens.
Is that one of the volunteer roles then, is to keep the place tidy as well?
We've got a fantastic ranger team, and they coordinate that sort of side of volunteering as well. So yeah, we have actually found out we've got some people we didn't even know were doing it. Had a couple of emails from people saying, what should we do with this rubbish that we've been picking up? So most people are lovely, and they come in and they want to look after it because they can see it's a nice area. They want to go there. But yes, people can get involved picking up rubbish, and that's really, really welcome. Not just at the forest centre, but in all of our other woods as well. We've got some really committed local people who see it as their wood. It is their wood. We've sort of planted it with them and for them. And they help us to keep on top of any antisocial stuff or any litter as well. So we're lucky in that respect.
Yeah, it sounds like one of the things that young people can do as part of their social action projects. What other things have you got? Have you got things on the horizon? Have you got campaigns? Have you got things they can be involved in the coming months?
The big thing that we've got coming up is more tree planting projects. So there is scope for that. To be fair, at the moment, most of our volunteering activities are on hold because we're working from home. We've pretty much said to our volunteers, until we hear otherwise or until things change, we're not having the volunteers coming into the workshops at the moment, and we're not having certain groups of volunteers back. We do have some guys who look after the sensory garden. They're back and they're working, but we don't have the big things that we would have normally had. I think last year the NCS guys were fantastic, and they helped at our big fundraising day, which would have been coming up in about a month's time. They looked after a stall for us and did a tombola and a raffle, and they got together a really great raffle prize. So fundraising is something, and helping at events for fundraising is something we need help with.
Mm-hmm.
At the moment, though, those events just aren't happening. So in the future, like you said, in a post-COVID world, hopefully, but at the moment, there's just not anything going on in that respect.
I just wonder if there's any scope for some digital stuff, with cameras, with interviews, with documenting things, with raising awareness, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we were due to have a wildlife week, and we were going to have lots of experts coming along and talking to people about the various wildlife things we've got. It would be probably useful if we could get some of those things captured still digitally, and like you said, put on the website. So yeah, if anyone's a digital whiz and they've got some ideas of things that we could do, because website content now for us is really important. That's where most people are kind of contacting us. Yeah,
you said whiz. Actually, on the subject of that, really, it's something that we've learned. We've been doing these podcasts and learning on the go, and I would say it's time consuming to a certain extent, but it's easy in the sense of the accessibility of it. Like, you record one, you can stick, I mean, even sort of young people with their phones and all that, they can do a video and you can edit it within the device and then put things out. It just seems a lot more possible these days to be able to do things like that. And I think the sort of guerrilla nature of it, the sort of out is quite an attraction as well, with and putting things together at the end. So yeah, okay, possibly some projects around that as well. I would have said, like, the workshops probably sound like a good idea, but obviously that's closed at the minute. I wondered, like, with some of the conditions at the moment being somewhat relaxed, but coming with caveats, with masks and with hand washing and social distancing. And I wondered if there's any talk with your organisation about returning, or, because once everyone's got a mask, I mean, we're kind of back, as of 13th of July. I wondered why perhaps your organisation isn't going down that road yet.
I think for us personally in the office, I think it's a logistical issue. We can't physically distance ourselves enough from each other because we're a fairly small team, but we work in a fairly small office.
Okay.
That we are easing that. I've got some face-to-face meetings coming up this week, which will be complete novelty. And I think, things will change. I think with the volunteering situation, the main reason, again, it's logistics. Having people in a workshop, not knowing always how many of them are going to come along on any given day, trying to make sure that people only use one bit of equipment, or that they are staying well away from each other, just seems not really doable in a fail-safe way at the moment. But yeah, I mean, it's changing every week, to be honest. It's under review constantly, and I imagine that fairly soon things will change and we will start getting back to some sort of new normal.
Yeah, going back to the tree planting, when you say tree planting, I'd sort of form an opinion about what that looks like, actually, but I might be way off. What does that involve? If that's something that maybe young people can do as a social action, what would they need to do? What do they need to prepare for? That kind of thing.
Have you never come out and done one? You've never come out and planted trees with us?
I'm afraid not, no.
Wow.
Tell us how it works.
So the tree planting in schools is slightly different, because that involves, I do some prep work in that I'll go and speak to the kids at assembly, and then it's simply, I will order the trees and get all the spades and everything else ready, and then I just need usually extra pairs of hands to help the children, because sometimes the children are really little. If they're primary school kids, they can't really dig a hole very well. It's just, and crowd control, just making sure that they're not doing anything wild and planting trees in the middle of a playing field. So it's just sort of help being there and looking after the little ones. On our public tree planting day, we will have all of the trees out already on the field and all of the spades and everything, and then people can either come along and just plant trees because they want to, so the young people could do that, or they could help with tree planting demonstrations, for example, or giving out information as people leave the site. Is we're looking at usually about 300, 400 people come along to the big public day. So there's a lot of people there that we want to give our information to. And we don't always have enough hands to be able to do that as we'd like to. That said, our volunteers are actually brilliant at turning out in force for tree planting, but we always need extras, always need extra pairs of hands.
In my naivety, I thought tree planting would involve digging a hole in the ground and putting a seed in. But it sounds like you're actually putting trees in. Is there a reason why you don't start them from scratch?
It's quicker to buy them from a nursery already established. The other thing is you can see where you put them. If you just put an acorn in the ground, you could probably put a stake next to it and remember where it was. But the trees that we plant are already a couple of years old, but they're only, I don't know, a couple of feet big. So yeah, it's just giving everything a head start, really.
Nice. Okay, so that's good. There's still things that people can be involved in. I think it would be around August, September time, potentially, for young people to approach you. Are you okay being the main point of contact? Are you okay having your surname as part of your email, or do you want a more generic one or office one?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine being the contact. The one thing I would say, there's quite a big caveat here. Tree planting doesn't happen until December, January, February. Okay. That's when the trees are dormant. So, and it sort of makes more sense, because if you plant them in the driest period of the year, or what used to be the driest period of the year, they're not going to have such a good chance of making it. So the actual tree planting is a winter thing. But in normal years, there are other things that the young people can get involved with, specifically things like fundraising and helping us to get the word out. This is an exception this year, obviously, but there's potential to find projects for young people to get involved in still. So yeah, I'll be the contact for that.
Yeah, I think especially since I imagine you're always looking for anecdotes or people reporting back on their enjoyment of an area that you are responsible for, feedback, that kind of stuff. It always helps with funding applications in my experience, but stuff like that.
Yeah. Stuff like that's absolutely brilliant. I mean, if anybody wants to go and stand in our woods and ask people questions about how they feel about, walking around there and stuff, that's brilliant. Any of that, first-hand feedback is great.
Okay, great, thanks. Well, I certainly feel educated, in particular about the forest centre. Yes, I was one of those people that just thought that's what it was, because that's always where I went to when I was supporting young people into volunteering. And so it's obviously a sort of corridor almost of woodland area that you're responsible for, right in the middle of Bedfordshire by the sound of it. So yeah, that was kind of broadened my knowledge. So thank you for that. I'm sure young people will find this useful as well, and forming the basis of some of their social action projects, whether there's a lockdown or not. So there's potential in both areas, I'd like to think. And then just to contact Joe if they want to even just have a chat about some ideas that they might have that we both haven't really thought of, that you could run by you, because I sometimes see the social action as a meeting between the ambitions of the young people and what an organisation can actually meet. So, obviously just have a chat if you're not sure, I would say. But yeah, thanks very much for that. I'll sign off now, and as I'm saying to all the people I'm speaking to, I hope I get to see you in person in the future, and hopefully next year's NCS will be much more non-social distancing, so fingers crossed for that. All right, thanks, Joe.
Thank you.